This podcast is rated E for explicit and by category of true crime contains language and descriptions of crimes not suitable for young or sensitive listeners. The murder of Mary Plummer is not without suspects. But what do you do when all of the people who have motive and opportunity also have an alibi? As we learned this week, no alibi is airtight. We just have to find the leaks. This is part 3 of Why Mary? The Alibi. And you're listening to The Cold Case Chronicles.
I know your secret. I know the truth. I know your secrets and I'm telling on you.
Last week, the team covered Mary's husband, Steve. And while his alibi of illness and being at home with the kids is not without flaw, there was no insurance settlement, and he did pass a polygraph, even if some of the kids have doubts. Mary's ex-husband, Joe, with a motive as old as time, also had an alibi, as you'll soon hear. What if there was someone else? The crew gets to work.
So with most cases, you need to look at all the suspects that you can think of. An ex-husband would definitely be on the list because, as we know, most divorces, even if you're a nice person, don't go super smoothly.
Right.
So we're going to talk about Mary's ex named Joe.
Yes, that includes his new wife because he actually left Mary for her. So I'm sure there's bad blood there as well. Joe met Mary in grade school, married her out of high school. She actually was pregnant whenever they got together to get married. After 3 kids, the marriage failed, particularly because he was going outside of it and having an affair. He decided to marry someone else. So,
yeah, usually if you want to marry someone else, you also have to divorce.
Yeah. So. Needless to say, neither side of their family was happy because they were both from Catholic backgrounds. They expected to stay together forever. The first couple years, according to Joe, were really rocky, understandably. And they fought over things like child support because she wanted some.
Well, I mean, she didn't have a job. She wasn't working. She was a stay-at-home mom with very young kids at that point.
Right. Yeah, and if you're getting a divorce because he was unfaithful and she wasn't, you need to give her some money. That's not fair.
Right. And she never had a job. You know, she expected her whole life to be the mom, the wife, taking care of the kids, taking care of the home. And now here she is basically out on the street taking care of 3 kids with no work experience.
And a huge disparity in income. Even when she would start working, because she has no experience, she's never been to college, she doesn't have advanced skills that are starting to be needed in that time.
Right. That was the things that they fought over. Now, the week that Mary was murdered, it was otherwise normal. 2 days before she was murdered, Joe picked the kids up, took them to a movie. He also had 2 stepdaughters with his new wife. And the day before, much like Steve, he started to get the flu. Big thing going around. I think definitely probable that they both had the flu at the same time.
Especially if the kids were going back and forth, and we all know kids carry those germs around.
Yeah, little petri dishes.
So they could have had it from the kids.
Yeah. So on Thursday, the day of the murder, he says he went to work later than usual because he didn't feel well, and he got home around 4, which was earlier than he usually, because of him feeling poorly. He got home earlier. He slept on and off all evening with his wife, and his stepdaughters were home with him. And he spoke on the phone with Mary Jo to ask about her report card that day. That was around 9:30 p.m. And around 10 o'clock, his brother and his sister-in-law, who lived just next door, came over to see some wedding pictures that Joe had taken of their wedding. But Joe didn't get up whenever they came over. He was still upstairs asleep. But he did scream downstairs and tell them all to be quiet. And then they
That
left.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Right.
I was like, because I had that H1N1.
Yeah.
Like, what was that? Like 7 or 8 years ago, the year they ran out of the vaccine. And I do remember driving home from Chicago to Indianapolis with this like 105-degree fever and the kids in the backseat just going, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, shut up.
I know.
Oh my
I just need to
God.
concentrate.
That's the worst.
Because I'm shaking and I'm like, the car's like, I'm like, shut up. I just have to focus on getting home.
Yeah,
is
it's the
bad.
worst when you're sick and someone has someone over or kids won't be quiet. It's just like, please, I just want everyone to go away. They only stay till like
That's me
20
every
minutes.
day.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah,
week.
even when I feel well. That's
me without H1N1.
Yes. They stayed about 20 minutes and then went home. Well, then Joe decided to get up around 10:30. He called his brother to come back over. You know, I mean, if you're taking medication, your fever breaks, whatever, you're feeling better. So his brother comes back over. They chit chat for a little while, and then his brother goes back home. He goes back to bed. That was it. You know, he went to sleep for the night. Well, then MJ gives him a call around 1 a.m. and gives him the news that something had happened in the family. There'd been an accident. Here's the thing. He didn't know at that point that it was Mary. He felt like it was probably Mary's mom because she had been in and out of the hospital a lot. And the police told MJ, don't tell him anything. Don't tell anyone anything. Just tell them there's been an accident. They need to come here. Because a lot of times officers will do that to keep people from freaking out on the way over, which to me, I would freak out even more not knowing.
Yeah, and I thought a lot of times they would just go to the house instead of calling them over.
Yeah, but if they will if it was like your daughter,
Okay.
You know, but if it's
Your
your
ex.
extended family and stuff, they would just try and get them to the house.
Okay.
But I would rather you just say, hey, this has happened. Can you get here? Than there's been an accident. Come over.
They probably also wanted to get his initial reaction.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that had a lot to do with it.
And that just totally boggles my mind because I spend so much time just in this constant state of anxiety. So when something goes wrong, I'm really calm. Like in a car accident, surprisingly calm. When my son broke his arm, surprisingly calm.
Right.
Like it's, and then I'm like, people are like, why are you not upset about? I'm like, I will break down
on my own.
My own when I am alone and in about 4 days, and it will all hit me at once, and I won't see you for 12 hours.
Yeah, my police report would be all over the place. Like they would say she had absolutely no reaction. She definitely did this because if they said my husband was brutally stabbed to death, I'd be like, oh wow. And then I'd say, can I see? Like, can I check this out so I can, try and figure this out with you? They'd be like, this girl is really, really messed up. Like something's wrong with her.
So did he come to the house immediately?
Yeah, he went to the house and he said, was surprised that it was Mary. He also said he didn't know that she was working at Lazarus at the time. He knew that she had been looking for part-time Christmas work, but didn't know that she had been working.
Right.
And he told them that he owned absolutely no guns. So he had no guns in the house at all. That was his alibi. He had an alibi. It was his new wife. It was his stepdaughters, his brother, his sister-in-law. It was all pretty solid for him. As well as he didn't own a gun.
Right.
Yeah.
And not to mention, he lived way on the other side of town. Like he lived north of Indy, around Butler area.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't even anywhere near where the accident
So even if
happened.
he had a quick break in that alibi,
Right.
he couldn't have made it all the way there and back.
It would have taken him a good hour to make it to the scene of the crime and then back home. And it's not like a little 5-minute round trip.
Right.
It would have been an
Yeah,
hour.
I was thinking that he still lived in Avon.
No. So it's just an hour is a lot of time to misplace in the alibi.
Yeah.
Now we're going to talk about Mike Burnett. In March 1989, according to Indy Star article, A Crime Stopper tip came in alleging that Mike Burnett had knowledge about the murder of Mary Plummer. The caller said Burnett set the woman up because his wife was going to be told of the affair with the Plummer lady.
Okay, so they're saying Burnett wanted Plummer killed because his wife was going to find out about her.
About an alleged affair for one anonymous phone call.
Right. Why it doesn't make sense. Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, he's gross and she wouldn't be having an affair with him. But
you don't know that.
I do. I've seen his photo.
Yeah, but you don't know that you never know.
Yeah, I guess. The other thing that I thought when I saw this was, why would it say the woman and then call her Plumber lady?
So, yeah, because when you were saying that, I said the woman, Mike Burnett, Plumber lady.
Right. That's 3 separate people.
Mm-hmm. But why would he set up some, quote, the woman?
Well, who is the woman?
Right. So it doesn't make a lot of sense the way it...
Who said this?
But wasn't Mike having an affair at that time?
He was having an affair at all times.
So the woman could be any woman.
Yeah, it's really confusing. It's alleging that Mike Burnett had something to do with her murder. Okay. That's what the statement is alleging.
And where did the statement come from again?
Crime Stoppers. We will find out in a moment where the statement comes from.
Okay.
Mike owned Riviera Builders, and he was involved in several other business dealings, including Indiana Baptist Temple, which he doesn't seem like... I mean, I can't judge because my mouth does not make me sound like a Christian half the time, and I am. Like, I love Jesus and I cuss a lot. It's just 2 things. But his dealings with Indiana Baptist Temple were under the table, I feel, because they got in a whole lot of trouble for a lot of things. You can look it up online. I'm not going to go into it.
Can you just name like 1 or 2 of them?
Here's the headline. After 17 years of refusing to pay taxes, the Patriot-linked Indianapolis Baptist Temple was seized by the federal government after a 92-day standoff. But the unregistered church's movement is still in business. So that kind of tells you...
Okay, so it's not even a legitimate church.
That kind of gives you a little
the government
taste of it.
Will pretty much let you start a church for anything, but they were like... That's not happening.
They had tried to keep the most volatile elements outside. Supporters from the Ku Klux Klan, for instance, were not allowed in. Still, would the arrival of federal marshals seizing the church for unpaid taxes trigger violence? Like, this article's great. So there's a lot of stuff going on there.
Oh, man. This is like... David Koresh, this was not an original idea that he had.
Right. There's a lot of stuff going on there. So he was involved with that.
That's not great.
Yeah.
No,
so
not at all.
That's not good reputation to be
that
part of.
That doesn't sound like a Bible temple at all.
No. And he was involved with a lot of different body shops, kind of under the table dealings as well, running money through places.
Yeah, like, because you can have cars come in and out all day. Oh, we're just giving an oil change.
Yeah. Well,
cash business.
Everything is cash business. A lot of body shops are cash business. So he had a lot of that dealing going on too. To know him more is to discuss his history with crime outside of that. This is just in the 3 years leading up to her murder. June 15th, 1985. Mike was involved in a road rage incident on Rockville Road where he sped up behind a couple. And the couple had, and I feel this a little, the couple had pretended like they were going to turn off and then changed their mind and pulled back onto Rockville Road.
Oh, I do that all the time because I'm never paying attention. I'm like, is this my turn? Nope.
Yes.
Next one.
He came up behind them and was like right on their ass then. And so the guy started feeling intimidated, decides to pull off at the little gas station there. Mike pulls up behind them, gets out of the car, walks up to their vehicle, and kicked the side of their car. And so they drove away. Like,
what is
who
he, a
does
toddler?
that? Yeah, right?
How are your tires? Let me kick your tires to see how they were.
I know.
Good job.
Good job.
Have a nice
sir.
day. Move along.
So the couple decided to pull into the Kroger parking lot to see if there was a dent in their car because they were just like trying to get away from and then want to see their car. So they pulled in. When they did, Mike pulled in behind them. He got out of the car, and so they stayed in their car. He got out, walked over, opened the driver's side door, and punched the guy in the face, breaking his nose, and his fist came off the guy's head and punched the woman in the jaw.
In those 1980s cars, they did not have those bucket seats. That was like one long seat, and those were wide-ass vehicles.
Went straight through. So the driver sustained a broken nose, and then he fled. He was in a vehicle that, of course, wasn't registered to him. It was registered to a B&B Auto Sales, which he was associated with. They did finally arrest him for the battery charge. And then August 13th, 1987, he busted the windshield and stole tools from inside of a truck that was owned by his ex-girlfriend, Beverly. Keep that name in mind. You'll hear it later. Ex-girlfriend, meaning ex-girlfriend while he was married, not just the ex-girlfriend from back in the day. It was a
recent affair.
And it was her husband's truck. And Mike had reportedly driven by their home numerous times, yelling out the window, calling her on the phone, calling her place of employment, harassing her. So
this is not sane person. Like,
no,
I understand road rage, sort of. Like, maybe not to that far of an extreme, but I've thought about tapping some cars with my car before.
Yeah, I did that.
And I get
when
that.
You're 20.
And I get that, but to punch someone and then to go on and intimidate and basically stalk and harass someone.
He thinks he's in the mob. You know, like he comes across like that. Like,
the Avon Mafia.
Watch out.
They're coming for us now.
Right. September 24th, 1987. So this happened the year prior to her death. Mike was turned into police for suspicious activity at Great Skates skating rink in Avon. Mike would show up at the skating rink in the parking lot in two separate vehicles. He would come in one vehicle sometime and one vehicle another time. And they were registered to B&B Auto Sales. Young girls would come out and sit on Mike's lap and kiss him around 11 a.m. and 2:30 p.m. And Mike would come and leave money for the girls underneath a rock outside of the skating rink. This was the owner of the skating rink that reported it.
My stomach is like, I might vomit right now.
So 3 days after the report, Mike was caught at the location, and he admitted to police that he was married and that he had been leaving money for Beverly, there's that name again, under some of the rocks there because she was with a new boyfriend and he was supporting them. They advised him not to come back to that location, and then they closed the case. What about the girls on his lap?
No shit. Because adults don't go to skating rinks.
No.
Except to pick up their children.
I don't know. Yeah. I would skate in a skating rink.
I skated in a skating rink.
I love skating.
I was awesome at skating.
If someone tells you that there's young girls sitting on his lap, you don't just take his word for it that, he's just dropping some money off under a rock.
Call Beverly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the August prior to the November she was murdered, Mike filed a report saying that he was in a relationship with Beverly and it had happened 8 years prior and that he lived with her on and off for 5 or 6 years. True statement, though, he actually bought a house for her and her kids in Cloverdale. He was living two separate lives.
Yeah.
Also, how does he have so much money? Just because of the auto place?
The mafia.
Because he stole it?
He was also married to someone who I'm not going to mention on the podcast. If someone wants to know, they can look it up because they're a very prominent builder here. And so he had money from his wife and he had money from his father who also owned a building company.
Okay.
And
So
then
he
was
had-
doing that shitty
Yes.
side work.
And he had family money, and they didn't even realize he was funneling money right and left.
I imagine him looking like Ron Jeremy.
You imagine correctly.
Holy shit, really?
It's pretty spot on.
I want to get.
I
She's
will
going to
show
Google Ron Jeremy. Hold on.
You don't know who Ron Jeremy is. He's about to go to prison, by the way.
Did you get the naked picture?
Oh, is he a comedian?
No, he's
He's
a
a
porn star.
Oh. Well, he does not look familiar.
Is he a comedian? I love
He
it.
looks hilarious. He looks more funny than a porn star.
Oh, no.
Ew.
Ugh. Yeah, I'm not searching on my computer either.
Whatever. That's not the worst thing you're going to see.
Oh, no. So in August of 1988, Mike filed a report saying that he was in a relationship with Beverly 8 years ago, and he lived with her on and off for 5 or 6 years, and he had raised her children, her daughters. He said that his wife was aware of the affair, and he broke it off. Just so you know, someone I know has talked to his wife in the past couple weeks, and she said that she didn't know that he had had any affairs at all, which I find hard to believe because this was a long affair. He claimed that Beverly had been harassing him, calling his wife, his mother, his daughter, and his neighbors. He said she tried to extort $100,000 from him, or she was going to file sexual abuse charges of her children.
Huh.
He also claimed that he had given her lots of money thinking it would make her shut up and go away. And he gave the officer a letter that was very sexually suggestive by one of her daughters that was asking him for money. Now, all these kids are underage. So to me, what the officer should have done is said, okay, if you're raising these kids and they're giving you letters that are sexually suggestive,
oh, gross,
then we need to talk about you.
No shit.
You know, they went and talked to Beverly. Beverly says she was the one who broke off the affair after she found out he was married, that she didn't know he was married for about 5 years. She stated he was threatening her. He even beat her. He sent her to the hospital. She had reports of that after she broke it off. He called her, threatened her with hiring, quote, 2 N-words to kill her, and that he had these men on his payroll to do those type of things.
Oh, my God.
And that's not the only time he has threatened that. He threatened that to another guy, the exact same thing, 2 N-words on his payroll. Yeah. She claimed that she had contacted him that day before he had gone to the police, that she had contacted him and she was angry because she found out he had been molesting her daughters.
Yeah, rightly she should be, and she should call him and
kick his butt.
So that was him being proactive and going to police and being like, oh, she's going to do this and she's threatening to do this. So she says if I don't give her money, she's going to say I molested her daughters. So
because
that's
you were molesting her daughters.
Yes.
But they wouldn't do that probably because they're prominent business.
Right. They're a businessman and she was a stripper. So who are they going to believe? Whose side are they going to be on?
Definitely in the 80s too.
Yes. This prominent businessman or the person who worked as a stripper. They're going to go with the businessman. And
especially if he's like, here's some money.
Yeah. So they went, they talked to the kids, they interviewed all of them. They all admitted that he did it. They described everything.
It was disgusting.
Yeah, right. And then they all said, we'll all take polygraph tests. The police report said that, they tried to contact Mike after that. He no longer lived at the address that he had given. They made several attempts to contact him at his place of employment, but he didn't return the calls. He no longer was employed at those places, and so they closed the case.
What?
Yes.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Just because, oh my God.
You get out there and you find that fucking dog.
Yeah. No, that's, just in the story.
Oh.
The end. What the shit kind of detective skills was that? He changed jobs, so he's fine. It'll be fine. It'll just go away. Whatever.
Not our problem.
Yeah. So this guy allegedly is letting girls sit on his lap, kissing for money at great skates. And now you have children telling you that he's molesting them, and he gives you false information for an address, which is likely. He gives you a false place of employment, which is likely, and you just close the case. Now that you're caught up on this piece of shit, and what a piece of shit he is, allegedly.
Well, some of those are actual, like,
yeah.
Some of those are true, so that's not alleged.
We had to redo the whole podcast thing. We should have named it allegedly.
I know. I just was thinking that. I was like, we should name our podcast allegedly.
So that brings us back to Mary's death. Now, when the Crime Stoppers tip came in 4 months after the murder, of course, the Crime Stopper tip was from Beverly. Beverly's the one that called in the Crime Stopper tip. That can be looked at in two ways. First, it could be revenge.
Yeah.
You know, it could have been...
That's a long time. I mean, I would never not want revenge on someone who molested my kids.
Right.
But that is a long time.
Or who lived a life with me for 5 years and was married the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, and I believe it. But that's why investigators get paid, is to weed out the Crime Stopper tips. That's anyone can make a Crime Stopper tip. I don't know. I mean, it's obvious that she could have done that. It makes perfect sense. But Beverly obviously knows Mike better than anyone else. And I guarantee you, as a woman scorned, she knew everything there was to know about him after she found out he was married.
Oh, yeah.
She probably dug really deep into...
And then after being threatened with being murdered by...
And also him using her as an alibi of why he's leaving money around.
Yes.
For little kids or something.
Yeah, whatever was happening there. And maybe she did know he had something to do with Mary's murder. So maybe it was true. But he was questioned by detectives shortly after the tip came in, and he denied any knowledge of the murder at all. And about a month later, Mike himself contacted detectives and told them that they should contact 2 Avon teenagers because they might be able to provide some information about Mary's murder. So they questioned the teenagers, who told them that Mike had been with them at Raccoon Lake at the time of the murder. However, about 9 months after this happened, the teens contacted the detectives.
So we're like a year, 13 months out.
Yeah. They had been involved in a physical altercation with Mike, and it led to Mike being struck in the head with a hammer. So they felt like they should go to police. They were scared because he had people on his payroll.
Amy tracked down Mr. Burnett's alibi, and here is what she has to say in her own words about Mike Burnett and that alibi.
My mom was a single woman, 4 kids. All of us, a year or 2 apart. I had a piece of shit dad who, was abusive. So my mom did the only thing that she could at the time. She was a dancer at the Roost, which is now Dancers. And that's where she actually met Mike. She didn't know he was married. I don't really honestly know how long they dated. I just know that things moved really fast with him. So, like, we went from living in the trailer park. There used to be a trailer park right there by the Roost. I can't remember what it was called, but that's where we lived. So we went from living there to, there was a house over on South Laclede that we rented for a short while. And then he and my mom bought a house on Sheffield Avenue.
And all this time, she didn't know he was married?
No. She knew that he was into construction, like building homes, but not who or anything at that time. He was also involved with Indianapolis Baptist Temple. And so she just assumed that he said that he ran sound there, that's kind of what he did. So he was gone a lot. So we very rarely saw him. But they bought a house. And then, I don't know, we were there for We were there for a while. And then he said that he wanted to buy a house and be near a lake because he was into boats and things like that. So he actually moved us to Cloverdale. We lived off of Cataract Lake, and we lived there for a long time. He would come like on the weekends, and he would have a boat. We would do that. But it seemed like every weekend that he came, he had a different boat. I never really could explain things, why he just always had different boats. But he knew lots of people, knew a lot of people that were in that neighborhood that he would kind of introduce us to. He was the type of person who could get anybody to do just about anything that he wanted. I don't know how many years we lived on Cataract in the trailer. Then we ended up moving again to Kunot. There's a house down there. It's the only house that you can see on Cataract Lake. It's a big white house. That's the house that they bought. Somehow we found out years later that he was into real estate. We don't really know what happened with, my mom never found out what happened with the money from the sale of the house on Sheffield, from the house in Cataract. Don't know where any of that money went. Fast forward a few years, my aunts actually found out that he was married, and they found us. My mom was, we were all kind of estranged from our outside family. It was always just the five of us.
Did she quit dancing? And
She did.
So he just kind of kept you guys on this little island to himself.
We were a secret.
Right.
We didn't know that, but we were all a secret. And he was very good to us. I mean, he really was. He was a very good person. He made sure that, that we had food and that utilities were paid and that, anything that we needed, we had. My aunt finds out, she finds us, they come and tell us, and everything kind of comes crashing down. They tell him about, he's married. This is where he works. This is what he does. I would assume that he was trying to protect his wife and that part of his life at that point in time. But the house that we were living in, he was really good friends with Jim and Tim Flanagan. They owned F&F Body Shop. So he put the house in their name. I'm assuming it was to keep them from finding out that he had this, this big, huge house down there. And then he moves us up here. He continued to see my mom whenever she would see him and continued to, give us money and pay for things, even after all of that. Fast forward a few years, my mom is finally just she basically abandoned us too and took off. And so my sisters and I were just kind of left to fend for ourselves. So we would contact him, and he would make sure to give us money for food and everything. And what he would do is he would go to Great Skates, and there were rocks like at the back of the building. So he would put money under there for us, and then we would come pick it up. We did that for several years. And then my sisters and I, we kind of went did our own thing. I was the only one that really kind of stuck by him. I mean, he still was, we called him Dad. He was the closest thing that we ever had to a dad. We would go places. He took me to Florida. We'd go down to Key West, and, we would get a boat or something. And him and I, and usually one of his friends, I cannot for the life of me remember any of these people's names, but we would go to Florida. The last time that he took me to Florida, he left the boat there, and it was at West Palm Beach. It was, I can't remember the name of the marina, but I stayed there on the boat for like 2 months. He would send money to the marina, so I would be able to eat and things like that. And
how old were you?
At the time I was 16. Nobody said anything. I mean, I don't think nobody cared. So I stayed there for a couple of months. And then when I came back, I don't remember when this was. I know it was cold, but he had motorcycles too. So like every other weekend, we would ride bikes down to Raccoon Lake because he had a place down there. So we would go down there and we would boat and ski and then come back. At some point in time, he told me that the Hendricks County sheriffs had been watching him and had been watching him for a while. The reason they originally started watching him is because the money that he was putting under the rocks at Great Skates, the owners of Great Skates said, hey, we think there's some drug deals going on or something. So they had been watching him for a while. So he tells me they had been watching him for a while, putting this money under the rock for us, and they thought it was drugs. And he kind of casually mentioned Mary's name, just kind of in passing to me. And he's like, I need you to tell them that we were at the lake on this date. At the time, I didn't even really put anything together. Didn't really think anything about it. Didn't pay any attention to the news. Didn't read the newspaper. Didn't know anything about Plummer. So that's what I did. And he had said to me, I would rather pay you the $15,000 that it's going to cost me to pay an attorney. I would rather give you the money and not the attorney if you can tell them that we were together. So that's what I did. Not really thinking anything about it. And like I said, he kind of mentioned her name casually, kind of that just some woman that I know kind of, you know, thing. And I'm like, sure, whatever, Dad. A few months go past and I was at my apartment. Me and my girlfriend were there, my boyfriend at the time, and my boss was supposed to show up. We were just kind of all hanging out, probably smoking, getting high, drinking. And Mike showed up and he was just like completely out of his mind. So he takes me into the bedroom and he's throwing me into the walls while, all my friends, my boyfriend are sitting in the living room and I'm crying and screaming, trying to get somebody to help. I didn't know at the time, but my boss was outside the window and he was watching everything and he was flipping out.
Had he ever treated you like that before?
No, this was like completely just bad, really, really bad. He eventually walks out the door and then he runs into my boss who's standing out there. And my boss is like, leave her alone. I saw what you were doing. Leave her alone. Mike apparently lunged at him. The only thing that Rick had for defense was a claw hammer and he hit Mike with it and ripped his ear. Of course, my boss is freaking out. So I leave. We all leave the apartment and, my boss says to me, he's like, you have to go to the police. You have to say something because he cannot beat you that way. This is not good. He's like, I hit him. I don't know if I hurt him. He said, but I hit him with the claw hammer. I don't know how he's going to explain that. So we went to Plainfield Police Department. I talked to the Plainfield police and they said, okay, well, we need to call the detectives in who are on the Mary Plummer case. And I was like, I don't, why? Yeah. They said, well, because you provided an alibi for him for her murder. That kind of punches you in the gut a little bit. I was like, he didn't tell me that. He just asked me to do this. And he's like, well, we have to call the detectives in. I had to tell them this story from beginning to end. They said, well, we're going to need you. Would you be willing to wear wire? I said, yes, so long as, is it safe? And they were like, you'll be fine. It'll be fine. He won't. I was like, but if he hugs me or something, he can't be able to feel it or anything. And I said, and he will hug me. So I don't know, a few days go by. Of course, I told them, I was like, I don't even know if he will have it, if he'll talk to me, because I don't know how bad Rick hurt him. I don't know anything. I get in touch with them and we set up a meeting to meet at Coachman's in Plainfield. So I'm a nervous wreck and he's already there. So I go in and I sit down beside him. Of course, he hugs me and we start talking and he's kind of just, talking about his ear and how it was hard to explain to the hospital, So as we're sitting there, the detective walks by the table and I'm like, and he noticed, Mike noticed that something obviously had just happened because he kind of looks at me and he's like, are you okay? And I must have been as white as a sheet because the detective is walking by and then here comes another detective walking by and I'm like, what in the actual shit is going on? So I'm like, nah, I just don't feel good, At this point in time, he kind of changes a little bit and kind of it's almost like he's paranoid.
Right.
So I'm starting to panic a little bit. My boyfriend's panicking a little bit. And Mike is obviously in panic. And he's like, okay, we have to go to the car, right? I have to go to the car right now. I have to go to the car. And I'm like, okay. We get up and we walk out. I see the detectives in there. There's at that point in time, there's 3 or 4 of the detectives that are in there. It's all the people that had wired me up and everything. And I'm like, what is going on? Why would they do this? This is so stupid.
Yeah.
We get out to the car and, Mike tells my boyfriend, he's like, you need to go away. I need to talk to her. So we're in the car. He gave me money and he's like, the detectives are asking again about some things. Has anybody contacted you? And at this point in time, I played dumb because I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do. So he tells me again, if they come, just stick with your story. We were at the lake. You don't remember the dates or the times or anything like that. And I'm like, okay. So we part ways. I go to the Plainfield Police Department only to find out that the wire failed.
And that's why they were in there.
That's why they were in. Because at that point in time, they didn't know if something had happened to me, if he found the wire or anything else. So they had to make sure that I was okay.
You're like, I was until you walked past the table.
Right, right. And there was, they got a little bit of stuff on tape, but not really a whole lot. So the next thing I know, or the next thing that I can remember from all of this stuff is that they were going to prosecute him for obstruction of justice. Well, even Detective Fine, I believe he and his partner both said that they rushed it, that they should have given it more time. But Mike's attorney was really well paid. And at that time, my sister had written Mike a note telling him, we love you. We miss you. You're still our dad. We want to take care of you. His attorney turned that against me and my sister, saying that this was just a way for us to get money from him. Detective Fine said that they wanted to at least get some kind of charge. That's why they went with obstruction of justice.
And he still didn't spend a day in jail over it.
Mm-mm. I remember seeing on the news, I remember him walking into the Hendricks County courthouse and literally walking right back out.
Now, did he stay in contact with you after all that?
Not after that.
Attempting to buy an alibi speaks volumes to a person's guilt. Next week, we'll go over all of the evidence suggesting his involvement, but it still begs the question, why Mary? What was his connection to her? And what would his motive be? This and more next week. If you like what you've heard, please leave us a rating. Share your thoughts with us on social media, Cold Case Chronicles on Facebook and Instagram, and at Cold Case Crew on Twitter. And as always,
have the day you deserve,
especially if you buy an alibi.
I know your secrets and I'm telling on you.